Welcome to Emerging Civil War. I'm Chris Mackowski, and I'm pleased to be spending some time today with one of my favorite people in Gettysburg, Tim Smith. And Tim has been involved in some research that has unveiled a pretty major discovery today. Tim, welcome.
Hi.
And so you have been poking around, helping your colleague Andrew Dalton with the Adams County Historical Society, doing some research on a map maker. And you discovered a pretty fantastic map. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting that although I do have a few books and a few articles, I guess I'm mostly known for researching the story of this or that. And oftentimes, in my position as a research historian, people ask me questions about Civil War topics or Civil War regiments or, an aspect of the Battle of Gettysburg, and I'll research it and see what I can locate or find. So I guess over the years, I've made, sort of a catalog, of where I should go to look for things. And I go to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And of course, I've spent time at Carlisle, at the War College and their library. And I know the resources that are available. And of course, I know all the different internet resources that are available for research. So my colleague, Andrew Dalton, was working on a map maker named Simon Elliott, S.G. Elliott, he's known as. And he did a burial map of the Gettysburg battlefield. And basically, I read his article. He asked if I would be interested in, looking or poking around and seeing if I could help him find any more. But he did a really good job. The one thing I noticed, though, was that there were only like 2 original known copies of the map. And people kept looking at the same original copies. And the 2 copies of the maps were both at the National Archives, or I'm sorry, both at the Library of Congress. And they're available on their website. And I noticed there were differences in the 2 maps, slight differences. And I wanted to me, it kind of was suspicious that the maps were published, but there were only 2 known copies and none in any private repositories. I found that hard to believe. Perhaps it's just they were proof copies, they made them to publish them, they looked at them, and then they never went about making them public. I think that's probably the case, that there's just a couple proof maps that exist. And the Gettysburg burial map is just a sensational resource. But I decided I was going to try to find another copy. Now, I Googled it on the internet, S.G. Elliott or burial map, things like that, and nothing came up except links to the Library of Congress maps or links to somebody who was talking about that map in a blog, for instance. So I know that you just can't Google stuff on the internet and expect it to come up. That a lot of large repositories, you actually had to go to the website, and then the websites for these digital libraries have finder's guides on them, or you can, keyword search something within the website, but it doesn't come up, naturally just by Googling something on the internet. So I went to a few of my go-to places, like the Maryland State Archives, where I know their digital collection really well. And I wanted to go to libraries that had maps and see if there was another copy of this S.G. Elliott map. I went to the Philadelphia Free Library. I like their website. And I went to the New York Public Library. Now, the New York Public Library digital site, there are 2 other examples where I discovered something really cool on their site, photographic related, and then, announced my discoveries. And, I make discoveries all the time of information that's not generally known. And, sometimes I'm really excited about it and other people aren't so excited about it. So anyway, I went to the New York Public Library digital site, and I looked at their map collection, and I put S.G. Elliott in. I think I probably put Gettysburg in also. And this map came up. And I was like, great, they have a copy of it. I want to see, the map. And there are sites kind of awkward in the sense that, you have to actually physically download the item to look at it. So I downloaded the largest file that they had available of this SG Elliott map, and it took a few seconds and it popped up on the screen. And I knew right away it was the Elliott burial map, because it has these little squiggly lines for the horses that were killed and where they were buried. And it has slash marks for the Southerners and crosses for the Northern soldiers on the map. And I knew it was the burial map I was looking for. And I started to scroll through the map to try to find like the portion of it that I could recognize to see if, because there were two different versions of this map, and see which one it was. But I got to tell you, for like 5 or 10 seconds, my mind was just like confused. I couldn't figure out what I was looking at or why I couldn't get to where I was. I think I was looking for the Emmitsburg Road. And I kept seeing like Hagerstown Road. And I'm like, what am I doing way over there in, 116? And then I saw the Smoketown Road. I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then, of course, I zoomed out a little bit and it dawned on me that what I was looking at was an SG Elliott burial map of the Antietam battlefield. And I knew right away that no one who was knowledgeable about Antietam knew about this, or it would have been in books that have been written about the Battle of Antietam in the last few years. I know enough about the Battle of Antietam. I've read most of the books on Antietam. It's not like Gettysburg, there's a lot less books, but I knew right away that this was something that was unique. And I also knew that no one else, except probably the people at the New York Public Library who digitized it, no one else knew about this. And so I contacted my friend Andrew Dalton. And then, of course, right away, I thought I had to contact American Battlefield Trust and my really good friend, Gary Edelman, and tell him about it.
Now, I've seen the conversation between you and Gary. Gary, are you there? I've got to talk to you. This is big news. And Gary very enthusiastically, jumped in on this to kind of help you figure out what to do with it. Because to me, that's got to be a challenge. Like, here's a major discovery. What do we do?
Yeah. And, in the past, we have made discoveries photographically, like finding a new photograph of the Gettysburg battlefield that no one ever knew about, or a new photograph of this or that. And, you're always struggling. How do I make it public? You would like there to be an article about it with your name. And then it comes out and everybody's like, oh, look at this new article. But, in today's society, and especially during this time period, we're doing a lot of Zooms at American Battlefield Trust. We thought it would be good to unveil to everyone all at the same time in the public. And one thing that I find, for me, satisfying about this thing was we contacted the Antietam battlefield, and Brian Barr, that you might interview also. He's the person I know the best at the park, and Gary works with him all the time also. So we contacted him. Gary contacted him and told him about it. And as luck would have it, the Antietam battlefield is in the middle of revitalizing and redesigning their museum. And so, right away, Antietam was like, hey, we can make this a major part of our new museum exhibit. And that is going to be very satisfying for me when I go in there for the first time. And, it'll probably be I think it's 2 years when the new display and new museum will open. But I'm going to see that on the wall, huge, and know that I had something to do with that being on the wall. So it's just fabulous.
That's fantastic. I want to talk a little bit more about the impact of this map on the battlefield. But before I do, I just kind of want to circle back to something you said about how maybe the people at the library who digitized the map knew that they had it. But how is it that a major repository like the New York Public Library could have such a unique and important resource and not know it's there?
I think they just have such a large collection. And, in this, I also find this about, especially with civil war photography, which again is the thing that I research often and I look around, is that someone has a photograph, but they don't know that it's a variant of a famous photograph or that it's unique in some way. And there's similar photographs everywhere, and they don't, unless you were familiar with all the other Civil War photographs and Civil War maps, how would you know that what you have, it said in the Elliott burial map, for instance, it says it's printed, it said it was published, you know, other people must have it, other people must know about it. How would you know with a vast collection that you're going through document after document after document and digitizing it, that all of a sudden, wow, I'll bet you no one's ever seen this before. You wouldn't know unless you're an expert in that field. So I'll bet you that there are other fields of expertise besides Civil War maps or Civil War photographs. And those people can go to that New York Public Library website, put in something, and find something really cool also. It's just an amazing collection, a large collection, and they've done an excellent job making their stuff available to the public. So that's what, you know, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all that they would put it up and not realize the uniqueness of it.
Now, the dead at Antietam have been documented before. The photos that were taken there right after the battle, probably the most famous example. So how will this map supplement what we already know about the burials at Antietam?
I think when you look at, okay, so Antietam, it was the first time in American history where a cameraman was on the battlefield after the fighting was over and took photographs of the dead on the battlefield. But there are also many photographs that show burial operations. There's a burial crew shown in one photograph. There are several photographs that show fresh graves with headboards. And near the sunken lane, there is a long trench that during the process, the burial crews of putting bodies into. And as you know, luck would have it, this burial map actually shows the location of the Union and Confederate burials after the battle. And each of those photographs where you see graves is actually shown on the burial map. But I think in one sense, there's a couple things. One thing is that you see in these photographs by Matthew Brady's crew, you know, Alexander Gardner and his associates, single graves. Here's a single grave here and a single grave there. And when you look at the map and you look at the area north of where the visitor center is now, you know, the Hagerstown Road, the Smoketown Road, the area towards the cornfield, the number of burials is just astounding. And you can see the heavy fighting on the map. It's just a staggering illustration of the number of dead that were buried on the battlefield afterwards. One interesting thing, a second thing I was going to mention, is that the map confirms some theories or some postulations that people made over the years. Now, William Frassinito wrote a book about Antietam, a photographic legacy of America's bloodiest day. And on his front cover of his book is this photograph. And it's in the book. And it's a tree near the center of the battlefield. And of course, William Frassinito took the rock formation that's in the tree. And of course, he was using a high resolution. He used a print made off the original negative with his magnifying glass, and he could detect some rocks, and he found the location of it. And also he read the single grave in front of the tree, and he could read some of the name, and then he looked through the rosters and figured out that it's John Marshall of the 28th Pennsylvania, Company L, 28th Pennsylvania. So that's the postulation, I should say, or theory that he came up with as the name on the grave. Of course, we get the map right away. I'm talking to Gary on the phone, and Gary's like, look, there's John Marshall's grave in the middle of exactly where it's supposed to be. So it confirms, although, you know, it was pretty good detective work anyway, but it confirms that that single grave is his grave. And near the Burnsides Bridge, William Frassinito under magnification, noticed the names of 4 men from the 51st New York that were actually on the headboards near the Burnsides Bridge. And one of those guys that he identified on that headboard is also shown on the map as identified. The Gettysburg Elliott map only has 18 identified graves by name. I mean, there's thousands of slash marks, but only 18 by name. The Antietam map has 50 identified location, burial locations by name. It's fascinating.
One of the things that stunned me when I had the opportunity to look at the map are all those hash marks that you mentioned, and it was just a graphic illustration of the scope of the slaughter that took place there, and kind of a real gut check moment for me as far as just what that really meant. Stunning work.
Yeah, Antietam, they also have that illumination every year where they put candles out for the number of casualties. I don't know exactly how many the bags they put out, 23,000, but they have, and you drive through the battlefield and you see a candle for every soldier that's killed, wounded, or captured. And, people remark about what an impact that has on them, just seeing the number of bags and candles and thinking that each one represents a person. Now here it's just dead shown on the map. And recently, one of the park rangers counted, and there's almost 6,000, hash marks on the map. So it is a staggering number. And when you just see places, for me, my favorite place on the Antietam battlefield is generally the West Woods, and the fighting that took place in the West Woods, and the number of bodies in the West Woods and around the West Woods area just hit me.
Now, speaking with historian Chris White, he told me that, and he specifically mentioned the West Woods, that this map may help challenge or redefine some of the interpretation about where some units were during parts of the battle. What are some of the things that we can also look at this map and take away that might help us to kind of better understand Antietam?
Well, I think, the individual stories of the 50 people who were identified on the map already, Antietam historians such as Dennis Fry or Tom Clemens, or the rangers that work at the park, Keith Snyder or Brian, they're already using this map, and they'll probably take people to these sites on the map and say, hey, so-and-so was buried here, and they can tell his story, so they can better tell the story of the individual soldiers involved in the fighting. For me, on the Gettysburg Elliott map, there are several farms that are mentioned, listed, and the names of the farmers are listed on them. And in Gettysburg map, in 2 instances, this is the source for that farmer who lived there at the time of the battle. On other maps, it's not shown with labeled as the name. And on this map, there are several farms that are listed by name, and there's wood lines shown, and there's farm lanes shown on the map. And so you get an idea by where something is placed on the map. Now, again, I'm not speaking to the accuracy of the survey. That's a totally different point. But you can see the Dunker Church, and you can see the edge of the West Woods, and you can see where the Poffenberger farm is, the Alfred Poffenberger farm, or the Lavinia Groves farm, and you can see where the soldiers are buried. Now, granted, they might not always be buried along the line of battle that they stood and where they fell. Sometimes they are. They might be dragged here or there, but just seeing a line of graves. And I should mention, besides the 50 individuals that are mentioned on the map, there are a whole bunch of different places on the map where they give a whole row of bodies and tell you what unit it is. So it places units on the battlefield. Now, we have maps that show where units were, but I do think that there's going to be, there's going to be some conflict between what this map shows and what we thought that it would show.
I know, a big day for you with the announcement. Lots going on today. I don't want to keep you too long here, but before I let you go, Tim, anything you want to add about this remarkable story?
I guess, it's satisfying for me in that, as a pure researcher, that, sometimes you have to be tenacious. I don't usually just stumble across something. I usually find something because I'm looking for it. And a lot of times people are like, well, wow, how'd you discover that? Or how'd you find that? And I just try to make myself familiar with the resources that are out there. And sometimes I find things and I think that they're really, really fascinating and people it's going to have a big impact, and it doesn't. And so I was satisfied in this respect that as soon as I brought it to other people's attention, and you can even see by the video that Gary promoted for it, how excited people like Tom Clemens were, or the park rangers at Antietam are about it. And I didn't expect that they would be more excited than I was when I found it.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, congratulations on what I think is just a fantastic piece of work, Tim. Really, really cool. So,
Well, good. And thank you.
yeah, thanks for joining us today. For Tim Smith, I'm Chris Mackowski here at Emerging Civil War. Thanks for joining us.